This woman destroyed the most stable relationship she'd ever had because she thought she was smarter than everyone else. Her name was Chloe, and at 25 years old, she convinced herself that monogamy was outdated, that routine meant death, and that her boyfriend's devotion was somehow suffocating. 3 months later, she watched him fall in love with someone else, someone she practically handed to him on a silver platter. I'm Emma, and this is a story about what happens when you mistake boredom for enlightenment and throw away something precious because you thought you deserved better. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the grass isn't greener. It's just different grass. Let me take you back 2 years. Chloe was 25, working part-time at a retail store downtown, barely making enough to cover her car payment. Then there was Harrison, 27, financially stable, working in tech or finance. She never really cared enough to remember the details. What mattered was that he made good money, and when they moved in together, her financial stress evaporated overnight. But here's the thing about Harrison that made him different. He wasn't just paying bills. Every single evening, he'd walk through the door at 5:30 sharp and actually ask about her day. Not the obligatory, "How was work?" that people throw out while scrolling their phones. Real questions, real listening. He remembered the names of her difficult customers. He'd surprise her with her favorite coffee order. He'd notice when she'd had a bad day before she even said a word. To most people, this would sound like a dream. But to Chloe, it started feeling like a prison sentence. She'd watch him fold laundry on Sunday mornings with this peaceful contentment on his face, and instead of feeling grateful, she felt trapped. She'd see him organizing his desk drawer for the third time that week, and she'd think, is this really what my entire life is going to look like? The same routine, the same conversations, the same 3 restaurants on rotation? Harrison was happy, genuinely, completely happy with their little world. And somehow that made everything worse for Chloe. Then her coworker Brittany started talking about open relationships. Not just talking, evangelizing. According to Brittany, she and her boyfriend had opened up their relationship and it was revolutionary. They appreciated each other more. Their intimacy improved. They were growing as individuals. Chloe became obsessed. She started staying up late, diving down internet rabbit holes, reading article after article about how monogamy was this archaic social construct that modern, evolved people were moving beyond. And with every article she read, she became more convinced that this was exactly what she and Harrison needed. In her mind, the logic was flawless. They were both young. Why should they commit to each other forever without knowing what else was out there? What if she married him and spent the rest of her life wondering about the experiences she'd missed? What if there was someone who could excite her in ways Harrison couldn't? She wasn't planning to leave him. She just wanted to know what she was missing. What followed was 3 weeks of calculated persuasion. Chloe left articles about open relationships on his desk. She bookmarked stories about couples who'd supposedly strengthened their bond through exploration. Every evening when he came home, she'd casually drop references to celebrities or podcast hosts who talked about ethical non-monogamy. Harrison would read what she showed him, but his enthusiasm was nowhere to be found. He'd ask questions that she found frustratingly negative. Doesn't this usually end badly? What if someone gets too attached? What happens if one of us develops real feelings? To Chloe, these questions just proved how closed-minded he was being. These problems only happened to immature people who couldn't handle their jealousy, she told him. When people couldn't communicate properly, they wouldn't have those issues because they were different, they were better. She started pointing out every crack in their relationship. When was the last time they'd had a really passionate night together? They barely flirted anymore. They were more like roommates than lovers. Maybe if they both had other experiences, they'd appreciate each other more and bring that energy back to what they had. Every time she said these things, Harrison just looked sad, and his sadness frustrated her even more. The turning point came when Chloe told Harrison she felt trapped, not by him specifically, but by the entire concept of traditional relationships. She was 25 and had only seriously dated 3 people. How was she supposed to know if what they had was special without any comparison? She wasn't asking to leave. She was asking to explore together so they could choose each other every day instead of just staying together out of habit. Harrison finally said he'd think about it. When he came back with his answer, there was a condition. If he developed real feelings for someone else during this experiment, he'd have to end their relationship rather than string her along. Chloe thought this was overly dramatic. The whole point was that what they had was special and wouldn't be threatened by casual connections. But she agreed, completely confident it wouldn't be an issue. Harrison had been with her for 2 years. He wasn't going to throw that away for some random hookup. Plus, she was the one pushing for this. Obviously, she'd be the one who benefited more. Harrison would probably be too nervous or too picky to even find anyone worth dating. When Harrison finally agreed, Chloe felt an enormous rush of relief and excitement. Finally, they were going to break out of their routine. She immediately started making plans. She updated the dating profiles she'd secretly created weeks earlier. She reached out to Marcus from the coffee shop who'd been flirting with her, and the guy from her gym who kept asking her out. Harrison seemed quiet and withdrawn about the whole thing, but Chloe figured he just needed time to adjust. Within a week, she had 3 dates lined up. She felt alive again. The anticipation, getting ready, the flirting. She felt like herself instead of just Harrison's boring girlfriend. When Harrison asked if they should set ground rules, she dismissed the idea. Ground rules would just complicate things. They trusted each other. That should be enough. During those first few weeks, Chloe didn't pay much attention to what Harrison was doing. She was too caught up in her own experiences, finally feeling desired and interesting again. 3 months in, things weren't going the way Chloe had planned. The guys she was dating were fun for a few weeks, but none offered anything substantial. Marcus was shallow, obsessed with talking about gym routines and protein shakes. The other guys were decent, but clearly just looking for something casual with zero emotional connection. Chloe started feeling frustrated. She wanted the excitement of new relationships, but also the depth and security she had with Harrison. These other guys didn't know her coffee order. They didn't remember stories she'd told them. They didn't notice when she had a bad day or got her hair done. The validation felt empty. Meanwhile, Harrison seemed different. Happier, more confident. He'd started going out more, joining a hiking group, taking photography classes on weekends. When she'd ask about his dating life, he'd just say it was going well and change the subject. Part of her was annoyed that he wasn't sharing details the way she did, but she was too busy with her own drama to push it. What really started bothering Chloe was how unavailable Harrison had become. He used to always be free when she wanted to do something together. Now he had plans she didn't know about. He'd get texts during dinner and smile at his phone in a way that made her stomach twist. When she'd ask who he was talking to, he'd just say, "A friend," and put his phone away. Chloe started feeling jealous, which felt ridiculous because this whole thing was her idea. But she'd assumed Harrison would struggle with dating. He'd always been somewhat shy and awkward with women when they first met. She thought he'd go on a few boring dates, realize how good he had it, and come running back. Instead, he seemed to be thriving in ways that made her deeply uncomfortable. Her own dating life was becoming desperate. She was going out with guys she wasn't even attracted to, just to have something to do, trying to find someone who could give her those butterfly feelings. But everyone felt like a downgrade from Harrison, which completely defeated the point of this experiment. Chloe started picking fights about everything. Why was he always on his phone? Why did he seem distracted when they spent time together? Why wasn't he putting effort into their relationship anymore? Harrison would just look at her calmly and remind her that she was the one who wanted to explore other connections. But Chloe wasn't neglecting their relationship the way he was. When she tried to plan date nights or weekend trips, he often had other commitments. She felt like she was competing for time with her own boyfriend, which wasn't how this was supposed to work. The other people they dated were supposed to be extras, not main characters in their lives. She started questioning whether Harrison was following the unspoken rules. Was he getting too emotionally involved? Was he sharing intimate details about their relationship with some random woman? The whole point was to keep these connections light and fun, not to replace what they had together. The worst part was how he'd stopped engaging with her drama. When she'd complain about her dates or want to analyze what some guy meant by a certain text, Harrison would just nod and make non-committal sounds instead of really listening. He used to care about every detail of her day. Now he seemed distracted and uninterested. The discovery that changed everything happened on a random Tuesday. Chloe was scrolling through Instagram during her lunch break when she saw Harrison tagged in a photo at a downtown restaurant. He was smiling bigger than she'd seen him smile in months, but he wasn't alone. There was a woman next to him who looked happy and comfortable, not like someone on a casual date. Her name was Jessica, and she worked in his building. Chloe went down a rabbit hole, looking through Jessica's profile. There were multiple photos of them together going back weeks. Art galleries, hiking trails, what looked like a weekend trip to a cabin. They looked like a real couple. Not like two people casually exploring. What made it worse was how different Jessica seemed. She was older, maybe 28 or 29, with this confident energy that radiated through her photos. She posted about books she was reading, volunteer work, trips she'd taken solo. She seemed like she had her life together in a way that made Chloe feel juvenile and scattered. The photos of them together showed Harrison looking genuinely happy. Not the polite happiness he'd been showing Chloe lately, but real joy. They were holding hands. He had his arm around her. They were looking at each other like they shared inside jokes. It was everything Chloe had been trying to create with the guys she was dating, but they'd found it effortlessly. That night, Chloe confronted Harrison, demanding to know why he hadn't told her he was seeing someone seriously. He reminded her that she'd never asked for details about his dating life. He was respecting boundaries the same way he expected her to. But this wasn't just dating, Chloe argued. This looked like a relationship. When she suggested they should close their arrangement and go back to just the two of them, Harrison got quiet in a way that terrified her. He said he needed to think about it. That wasn't the response she was expecting. She thought he'd be relieved to get back to their normal routine. Instead, he seemed conflicted about giving up whatever he had with Jessica. Then he told her the truth. He'd developed real feelings for Jessica, and according to the boundary he'd set months earlier, that meant he was going to end their relationship. Chloe couldn't believe it. He was actually choosing some woman he'd known for 3 months, over 2 years of history. Chloe tried everything to change his mind. She cried. She got angry. She reminded him of all their good times together. She promised she'd be different, more appreciative, less focused on what she was missing. But Harrison just seemed sad and determined, like he'd already made his decision and nothing she said would matter. He started packing that weekend. Watching him fold his clothes and pack his books felt surreal. This was actually happening. He was actually leaving her for someone else. Someone she'd basically handed to him by insisting they open their relationship. The worst part was how genuinely excited he seemed about his future with Jessica. Not in a cruel way, but in a way that showed he truly believed she was better for him. After 2 years of Chloe trying to improve their relationship and make it more exciting, he'd found someone who gave him everything he needed without any of the drama. 6 months later, Chloe's life had completely fallen apart. Without Harrison's income, she couldn't afford their apartment. She moved into a cramped place with 2 roommates who were basically strangers. The independence she thought she wanted felt more like isolation when she came home to people who didn't care about her day or remember her favorite takeout order. Her dating life became a series of disappointing encounters. Word had gotten around their friend group about what happened, and guys seemed to think she was either desperate or unstable. None of them wanted anything serious. The ones who did were usually people she wasn't attracted to anyway. She started obsessively checking Harrison and Jessica's social media, torturing herself with updates about their perfect relationship, weekend trips, meeting each other's families, photos from art museums and hiking trails. Jessica would tag him in posts about books they'd read together or concerts they'd attended. Everything looked effortless and genuine in a way that made Chloe's relationship with Harrison seem forced and desperate by comparison. The breaking point came when Chloe decided to reach out to Jessica directly. She thought maybe if she warned her about Harrison's true nature, Jessica would realize what she was getting into. She sent a long message explaining how Harrison had emotionally cheated, how he'd strung her along while pursuing Jessica, how he had commitment issues that would eventually surface in their relationship too. Instead of being grateful, Jessica screenshot the entire conversation and shared it with people they knew mutually. Suddenly, everyone could see exactly how unhinged Chloe had become, how she was stalking their relationship and making up lies to break them up. Her reputation went from being the girl who'd made a mistake to being the crazy ex who couldn't move on. Work became impossible. She was constantly distracted and emotional, snapping at customers and coworkers. Eventually, her manager let her go, claiming she wasn't a good fit for customer service anymore. Between losing Harrison's financial support and then losing her own income, Chloe was completely broke. The dating apps that used to feel exciting now felt like a wasteland where she was increasingly desperate and transparent about her damage. Guys could sense something was wrong, and the few who were interested were usually looking to take advantage of someone clearly vulnerable. She tried reaching out to friends for support, but realized she'd neglected most of her friendships during her relationship with Harrison. The few people who still talked to her seemed uncomfortable with her bitterness and constant need to rehash what went wrong. The final blow came when Chloe found out through social media that Harrison had proposed to Jessica at the same restaurant where he'd first told Chloe he loved her 2 years earlier. They looked radiantly happy in the engagement photos, surrounded by friends and family who were genuinely excited for them. Jessica's ring was beautiful, and you could tell Harrison had put real thought into choosing something that reflected her personality. In 1 year, Jessica had gotten everything Chloe had wanted from Harrison: his full attention, his emotional investment, his commitment to a future together. And she hadn't had to beg or manipulate or threaten to get any of it. He'd given it all freely because she was the kind of person who inspired that level of devotion. Even after everything, Chloe still doesn't think she was completely wrong about wanting to explore other relationships. In her mind, how are you supposed to know if what you have is really special without comparison? And Harrison agreed to the arrangement, so whatever happened afterward was partially his responsibility too. Maybe she should have handled things differently, been less pushy, more considerate of his feelings. But if he'd really loved her the way he claimed, he wouldn't have been able to fall for someone else so easily. The fact that he moved on so quickly just proves that what they had wasn't as strong as she thought. Now she's living in a different city, trying to start over at 26. But it's hard to meet quality people when you're starting from scratch. Most guys her age are either immature or have too much baggage from their own failed relationships. Sometimes she wonders what would have happened if she'd just been content with what she had. But then she remembers how suffocated and bored she felt, and she convinces herself she would have ended up resenting Harrison eventually anyway. The experience taught her that you can't force someone to want the same things you want, no matter how logical your arguments seem. But it also taught her, in her mind at least, that some people aren't capable of handling complex relationship dynamics. Maybe Harrison was just too simple and traditional to appreciate what she was trying to create. She still thinks about them sometimes, wondering if Jessica will eventually get bored the way she did, or if Harrison will realize that what they had was deeper than whatever connection he has with Jessica. But mostly she tries to focus on her own future and finding someone who can match her energy and understand her need for excitement and growth. People keep telling her she should take responsibility for what happened. But in her mind, she tried to make their relationship better, and Harrison chose to throw it away for someone else. That says more about his character than hers. She just wishes things had worked out differently for everyone involved. And there you have it. Chloe's story is a painful reminder that sometimes we destroy the very thing we're trying to improve. She had a partner who listened, who cared, who showed up every single day with genuine love and attention. But instead of appreciating what was right in front of her, she convinced herself that routine meant something was missing. The truth is, every relationship goes through phases. The butterflies fade. The routine sets in. That doesn't mean the love is gone. It means the love is maturing into something deeper and more stable. But Chloe couldn't see that. She mistook comfort for boredom and devotion for possession. Harrison didn't leave because he stopped loving her. He left because she pushed him to explore other connections, and he found someone who valued what he had to offer, without needing to test it first. This story should make us all pause and ask ourselves, are we chasing excitement, or are we building something real? Are we looking for reasons to feel dissatisfied, or are we choosing gratitude for what we have? If this story resonated with you, made you think, or maybe even saved you from making a similar mistake, please hit that like button. Share this video with friends who might need to hear it. And subscribe to Mrs. Emma's channel so you never miss these powerful real-life stories that remind us what really matters in relationships and in life. I'm Emma, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, appreciate what you have before you lose it forever.